Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt tales that inspire and touch the soul. Today, we bring you a story about Ryan, a successful billionaire whose carefully built life takes an unexpected turn at a simple playground. A chance encounter with a little boy sets in motion a journey of love, discovery, and second chances that will forever change the lives of two families. Through challenges and heartfelt moments, this story reminds us of the profound connections that define what it means to truly be a family. Subscribe now to begin this unforgettable journey with us today. The sun hung low in the warm Los Angeles sky, its golden rays streaming through the leafy canopies of Griffith Park. The playground was alive with the carefree laughter of children, their shouts blending with the rhythmic creak of swings and the occasional bark of a nearby dog. Ryan Whitaker, a man who seemed to embody success, stood near the edge of the play area, his hands buried in the pockets of his perfectly tailored blazer. Amongst the casual joggers and parents in their weekend clothes, Ryan stood out, his polished shoes crunching on the wood chips beneath him. It wasn't often that he found himself here, but today was different. His 6-year-old son, Logan, had pleaded for a visit to the park, and Ryan, uncharacteristically, had agreed. Logan's energy was infectious, his bright laughter lighting up the otherwise muted corners of Ryan's life. Climbing the jungle gym with determination, Logan seemed fearless, his brown hair tousled and his cheeks flushed with excitement. Ryan watched him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. But there was a subtle weight in his gaze, a sense of guilt for the times he hadn't been there, for the moments lost to endless board meetings and late-night strategy sessions. Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a stark reminder of the world waiting just outside the park's boundaries. He glanced at the screen, a string of emails marked urgent, but for once, he slid the device back without responding. Logan's triumphant wave from the top of the jungle gym drew his attention back, and Ryan raised a hand in return, allowing himself a rare, genuine smile. "Hey, sir," a small voice called out, startling him. Ryan turned to see a young boy standing beside him, his round face glowing with the same energy as Logan's. The boy was about the same height, with messy brown hair and sparkling eyes that mirrored Logan's so closely it made Ryan blink in confusion. "Is that your son?" the boy asked, pointing at Logan. "He looks exactly like me." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. His eyes darted between the boy and Logan, who was now climbing down and bounding toward them with his signature enthusiasm. The resemblance was uncanny, so much so that Ryan found himself unable to respond immediately. Logan skidded to a stop beside them, his eyes widening as he took in the other boy. "Whoa," he said, his voice full of awe. "You look just like me." The boys stood side by side, their similarities impossible to ignore. The same unruly mop of brown hair, the same curious tilt of the head. Even the way they smiled was eerily identical. Ryan felt his stomach twist into knots as he stared at the two of them. "What's your name?" Logan asked eagerly. "I'm Dylan," the boy replied with a grin. "What's yours?" "Logan," he answered proudly. "And that's my dad." He jabbed a thumb toward Ryan, beaming. "What about you? Where's your dad?" Dylan's expression faltered for a moment before he shrugged. "I don't have a dad. It's just me and my mom." Ryan's chest tightened at the boy's words. Though he wasn't sure why, Dylan's tone was casual, almost dismissive. But the weight of what he said hung heavy in the air. Before Ryan could say anything, Dylan looked up at him, his innocent curiosity cutting through the tension. "You really are my twin," Logan declared, grabbing Dylan's arm as if claiming him as his own. Ryan was about to speak when a voice broke through his swirling thoughts. "Dylan, there you are." A woman was walking briskly toward them, her ponytail swinging with every step. She wore simple jeans and a light jacket, and though there was a faint weariness in her expression, her features struck Ryan like a lightning bolt. "Emily," he whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible. The world seemed to tilt for a moment as recognition set in. Emily reached them and placed a protective hand on Dylan's shoulder. Her sharp gaze flicked to Ryan, and he saw a flash of surprise, quickly replaced by something guarded, almost defensive. "Hi," she said cautiously, her tone betraying none of the emotions dancing in her eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but the words felt caught in his throat. The memories of their time together rushed back in vivid detail, nights spent talking for hours, the ease of their connection, and the abrupt, painful way it had all ended. His thoughts were interrupted by Dylan tugging at Emily's sleeve. "Mom, look, he's just like me. Isn't that crazy?" Emily forced a smile, but her grip on Dylan's shoulder tightened. "It's definitely surprising," she said carefully, her voice steady. "Come on, Dylan. We should get going." "But I want to play with Logan," Dylan protested, his face falling. "Maybe another time," Emily replied firmly, steering him away. "It's getting late." Ryan took a step forward, instinctively wanting to stop her. "Emily, wait," he called, his voice low but insistent. She turned back, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Not here, Ryan," she said quietly, her tone final. Without another word, she led Dylan toward the parking lot, her posture stiff and unyielding. Ryan stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. The resemblance between Dylan and Logan was undeniable, and Emily's reaction had only deepened the mystery. Was it possible that Dylan, Dad? Logan's voice pulled him back to the present. His son was looking up at him, his face full of innocence and curiosity. "Can Dylan come over to play sometime? He's like my brother." Ryan swallowed hard, forcing himself to nod. "We'll see, buddy," he said, though his voice felt strained. As they walked back to the car, Ryan couldn't shake the image of Dylan's face or the way Emily had looked at him. Something about this wasn't right. And for the first time in years, Ryan felt a crack in the carefully constructed life he had built. The drive home was unusually quiet. Logan lost in thought as he stared out the window, and Ryan grappling with the weight of a past he thought he had left behind. The drive home from Griffith Park was filled with a heavy silence. Logan sat in the back seat, gazing out the window at the city's sprawling streets, his face illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun. Normally, after an afternoon at the playground, he'd be buzzing with excitement, recounting every climb, every jump, every game. But today was different. His usually exuberant chatter was replaced by a thoughtful quiet, as if even his young mind was trying to untangle the puzzle of Dylan. "Dad." Logan finally broke the silence, his small voice carrying an unexpected weight. "Do you think Dylan and I are really twins? We look the same. Like, exactly the same." Ryan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed firmly on the road ahead. How was he supposed to answer that? The resemblance between Logan and Dylan was too striking to ignore. But he couldn't offer Logan an explanation he didn't yet have himself. "I don't know, buddy," Ryan said after a long pause, keeping his tone steady. "Sometimes people just look alike. It happens. But it's weird, right?" Logan pressed, leaning forward slightly. "I mean, he even kinda talks like me." Ryan didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was still spinning from seeing Emily after all these years and from the haunting realization that the boy she was raising could be his son. The timelines, the resemblance, even Emily's guarded expression, it all pointed to something Ryan wasn't sure he was ready to confront. When they got home, Logan dashed up to his room, already pulling out his favorite toys to occupy himself. Ryan, meanwhile, sank into the leather armchair in the living room, his mind racing. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of Logan's activity upstairs. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, leaning back as a flood of memories he'd tried to bury for years came rushing to the surface. He hadn't seen Emily in nearly 7 years. Their relationship had been a whirlwind, intense, passionate, but ultimately doomed by the demands of his burgeoning career. They'd met at a gallery event in Chicago, where Emily had been a curator for a small but vibrant art exhibit. She was everything Ryan wasn't: grounded, creative, and unafraid to speak her mind. For a time, she had been the balance he needed in his hectic life. But Ryan's priorities had been clear. Even then, his focus was on Whitaker Industries, the family business he had been working tirelessly to expand. Late nights, constant travel, and unyielding deadlines had taken their toll. Emily had grown tired of being an afterthought in his life, and their relationship unraveled as quickly as it had begun. The last time he'd seen her, they'd fought a fiery, emotional confrontation that ended with Emily walking out the door. Ryan had told himself it was for the best. He'd convinced himself that his career couldn't accommodate the chaos of love, that he was better off alone. But now, as the pieces of the past began to resurface, he couldn't help but wonder what he had missed. The next morning, Ryan woke early, the weight of the previous day still heavy on his mind. He dropped Logan off at school, promising him they'd talk more about Dylan later. But Ryan had no intention of waiting. He needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to him. Later that afternoon, Ryan found himself back at Griffith Park. The playground was quieter than it had been the day before, the sounds of children's laughter mingling with the distant rustle of leaves in the breeze. He scanned the area, his heart pounding as he spotted Emily sitting on a bench under a tree, a book in her hands. Dylan was on the swings, his carefree laughter cutting through the tension building in Ryan's chest. Taking a deep breath, Ryan approached cautiously. Emily noticed him immediately, her body tensing as he drew closer. She set her book aside and stood, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Ryan," she said evenly, her voice calm but wary. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you," he replied, his tone steady but firm. His gaze flicked to Dylan, who was happily swinging higher and higher, blissfully unaware of the tension brewing. "About yesterday." Emily crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "I figured you might." Ryan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Who is Dylan's father?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Emily's eyes darkened, her jaw tightening. "That's none of your business." Ryan stepped closer, his voice soft but insistent. "Emily, he looks exactly like Logan. Don't you think I deserve to know?" Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for a moment, Ryan thought she might relent. But then she straightened, her expression firm. "Not here, Ryan. This isn't the place for this conversation." "Then tell me where," he said, his tone softening. "Please, Emily. I'm not trying to make things difficult. I need to understand." Emily glanced toward Dylan, who had slowed his swinging and was now watching them curiously. She exhaled sharply and looked back at Ryan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd Street tomorrow morning. I'll explain what I can." "But not here." Ryan nodded, sensing that pushing her further would only make things worse. "Thank you," he said simply. As he turned to leave, Ryan felt the weight of uncertainty settle even heavier on his shoulders. Tomorrow might bring answers, but it would also bring questions he wasn't sure he was ready to ask or hear. The coffee shop on 3rd Street was bustling when Ryan arrived the next morning, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the hum of quiet conversations. He found a table in the corner and ordered a black coffee, his nerves simmering beneath the surface. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to the door, searching for Emily's familiar face. When she finally walked in, Ryan's breath caught. She looked tired but composed, her dark hair pulled back and her expression carefully neutral. As she approached the table, he stood to greet her, but she simply nodded. Sliding into the chair across from him, she placed her hands on the table, fingers interlaced, and met his gaze. "Let's get this over with," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. Ryan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Emily," he began, his voice steady, "I need to know the truth." About Dylan. About Logan. About what happened after we ended things. Emily's hands tightened slightly, her knuckles turning white. For a long moment. She didn't speak. Her gaze fixed on a spot just past Ryan's shoulder. He waited, giving her the space to gather her thoughts. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Ryan admitted softly. "I can't." She nodded, as though she had expected that answer. "All right," she said, her voice quieter now. "You deserve to know." She paused, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "After we broke up, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't tell you because, well, you were already gone. And I didn't think you wanted anything to do with me anymore. I figured I'd made the right decision letting you go." Ryan's chest tightened at her words. But he stayed silent, letting her continue. "When the time came, I found out I was having twins," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It was overwhelming, to say the least. I didn't have much money, and I didn't have any family to rely on. I told myself I'd figure it out somehow, that I'd do whatever it took to raise them both." Her gaze dropped to the table, and Ryan could see the pain etched into her features. "But things didn't go as planned," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The delivery was complicated. I wasn't in great health. And after they were born, the doctors told me it would be a long road to recovery. I could barely take care of myself, let alone 2 newborns." Ryan's heart ached at her words, his mind racing with images of Emily in those early days. Struggling alone. He had been so consumed with his work, so focused on building Whitaker Industries, that he hadn't even thought to check in on her. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The hospital social worker suggested an open adoption. Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "They told me it would give one of the babies a chance at a stable life. Something I couldn't promise at the time. I didn't want to do it. Ryan. It broke my heart. But I didn't see another way." Ryan leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "And Logan?" he asked quietly. Emily looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "He was the one who was placed for adoption. I thought about him every day after that, wondering if he was okay, if he was loved. But I never knew where he ended up. I wasn't allowed to know." Her words hit Ryan like a tidal wave, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with shocking clarity. "When I adopted Logan," he said slowly, his voice barely audible, "the agency told me he'd been abandoned. That's all they said. I had no idea, none, that he had a family. That he had you." Emily's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and sadness washing over her face. "I didn't know it was you either," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Not until I saw you at the park. And then, when I saw Logan," she trailed off, looking away as tears slipped down her cheeks. Ryan sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. Logan wasn't just the boy he had taken in out of a sense of duty and love. He was his biological son. And Dylan was his twin. The realization left him breathless, the weight of it settling heavily on his chest. "I can't believe this," Ryan said, running a hand through his hair. "All these years, I had no idea." "Neither did I," Emily said quietly. "I never thought our paths would cross again. And I certainly didn't think it would be like this." They sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Ryan looked at Emily, seeing her not just as the woman he had once loved, but as someone who had faced unimaginable hardship alone. He felt a pang of guilt, wondering if things could have been different if he had stayed, if he had been there when she needed him most. "What happens now?" Emily asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan met her gaze, his resolve hardening. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I do know this, I'm not walking away. Not from Dylan. Not from Logan. And not from this." Emily studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could trust his words. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "All right," she said. "But if you're serious about being a part of their lives, you need to understand that this isn't going to be easy." "I'm not expecting it to be easy," Ryan said firmly. "But I'm not going to let them go through life not knowing the truth. They deserve to know each other. They deserve to know the whole story." Emily nodded again, though the weight of the situation was evident in her eyes. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said. "For their sake." Ryan exhaled, feeling both relief and trepidation. The path ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. The days following their emotional conversation at the cafe were heavy with introspection for Ryan. He couldn't shake the image of Emily's tear-filled eyes or the weight of her words. His mind swirled with memories of their brief yet impactful time together, juxtaposed against the reality of two boys, Dylan and Logan, who had unknowingly lived apart but now deserved the chance to grow up as brothers. Ryan's first step was to reach out to Emily again, proposing a playdate for Dylan and Logan. His tone was cautious when he called, mindful of Emily's protective instincts. "I think it's time we let them spend time together," he said carefully. "No big revelations yet, just a chance for them to connect naturally." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Emily responded. "You really think it's a good idea?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "I do," Ryan replied. They clicked instantly at the park. "I think they'll enjoy it." Emily hesitated, and Ryan could feel her weighing the risks. Finally, she sighed. "All right," she said. "But we do this on their terms." "Ryan. No pushing. No pressure." "Agreed," Ryan said, relief washing over him. The first playdate was set for a sunny Saturday afternoon at Ryan's house. Logan, unaware of the deeper connection they were trying to foster, was thrilled at the idea of having a new friend over. He spent the morning excitedly preparing his favorite toys and games, his energy infectious. When Emily and Dylan arrived, Ryan greeted them warmly, but he could sense the tension in Emily's posture as she stepped through the doorway. Dylan, on the other hand, was all smiles, bounding into the house with an eager wave at Logan. The boys wasted no time diving into play, their laughter echoing through the house as they raced between rooms and explored Logan's collection of action figures. Watching them, Ryan couldn't help but marvel at how effortless their connection seemed, as if some unspoken bond was already at work. Emily and Ryan sat in the living room, the sound of the boys' joy filling the spaces between their careful conversation. "They're amazing together," Ryan said after a while, gesturing toward the hallway where the boys' voices rang out. "It's like they've known each other forever." Emily nodded, her expression softening. "It's strange, isn't it? How natural it feels. Like they're filling in a missing piece without even realizing it." For the next few hours, Ryan and Emily watched as the boys built forts out of pillows, chased each other through the backyard, and shared whispered secrets that made them both laugh uncontrollably. It was a joy so pure that it made Ryan's chest ache. When it was time for Emily and Dylan to leave, the boys were reluctant to part. "Can Dylan come over again soon?" Logan asked, his hopeful eyes darting between Ryan and Emily. "Maybe next weekend," Emily said, offering a small smile. "We'll see." Ryan and Emily exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. As they left, Ryan stood in the doorway, watching until their car disappeared down the street. The next few weeks saw a string of playdates, each one reinforcing the bond between Dylan and Logan. Sometimes they met at Ryan's house, other times, Emily hosted at her cozy apartment. The boys grew closer with each visit, their similarities becoming even more apparent. They shared a love for puzzles, an uncanny knack for finishing each other's sentences, and a mutual fascination with dinosaurs that led to hours of roaring and pretending to be T-Rex. Ryan and Emily found themselves falling into a comfortable rhythm, navigating the complexities of their shared history while focusing on the boys. There were moments of tension, Of course, old wounds that hadn't fully healed and new challenges that arose with their growing involvement in each other's lives. But there were also moments of connection. Quiet conversations over coffee while the boys played. And shared laughter at the absurdities of parenting. One evening, as the boys were engrossed in a movie, Ryan and Emily sat together on her apartment's small balcony. The summer air warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Emily asked, her gaze distant as she watched the city lights twinkle in the distance. Ryan considered her question carefully before replying. "I think we're doing the best we can," he said. "And for now, that has to be enough." Emily turned to him, her expression thoughtful. It's a lot to take in. For all of us. And I'm scared." Ryan. "Scared of what this might mean for Dylan? For Logan? For us?" Ryan reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I know one thing for sure, I don't want to walk away from this. From them. From you." Emily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And for a moment, she didn't speak. Then she nodded, her hand tightening slightly around his. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. "One step at a time." The boys' birthday arrived a few weeks later, marking a pivotal moment in their journey. Ryan and Emily decided to celebrate it together, hosting a small party at Ryan's house. The day was filled with laughter and joy as Dylan and Logan tore through their presents and devoured slices of cake shaped like a dinosaur, an ode to their shared fascination. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the backyard, Ryan stood with Emily on the porch, watching the boys play. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "For giving me this chance." Emily turned to him, her eyes soft. "Thank you," she replied. "For not giving up." In that moment, as the boys' laughter filled the air and the weight of the past began to lift, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. It was fragile, like the beginnings of a bridge spanning an uncertain divide. But it was real. And for the first time, he truly believed they could build something extraordinary together. The weeks following the boys' birthday party brought both hope and challenges. Ryan and Emily were learning to navigate the delicate balance of co-parenting while simultaneously addressing the complex emotions that came with reconnecting after so many years. Their relationship, once defined by youthful passion and abrupt endings, was now grounded in something deeper, a shared commitment to Dylan and Logan. The boys' bond grew stronger with each passing day. They were inseparable, spending their weekends exploring the woods near Emily's apartment, building elaborate Lego cities, and concocting wild plans for their future as twin adventurers. Ryan often found himself marveling at how effortlessly they fit together, as though the years of separation had been erased the moment they met. But as joyous as their reunion was, there were undercurrents of tension. Ryan couldn't ignore the challenges Emily faced as a single mother. Despite her strength and resilience, it was clear that juggling work, parenting, and the weight of their shared history had taken its toll. She rarely complained, but Ryan noticed the way her shoulders tensed at the end of a long day or the faint shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. One evening, after a particularly chaotic day that ended with the boys asleep in a fort they'd built in Ryan's living room, he broached the subject. Emily sat on the couch, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in weeks. "You know," Ryan began cautiously, "you don't have to do this all on your own." Emily glanced at him, her expression wary. "I've been doing it on my own for years," she said, her tone light but firm. "I think I've got the hang of it." "I'm not saying you can't handle it," Ryan replied, his voice gentle. "But you don't have to. I'm here, Emily. For the boys. For you. Let me help." She sighed, setting her cup down on the coffee table. "I know you mean well, Ryan. But it's not that simple. I've built my life around being independent. Letting someone else in, it's not easy for me." Ryan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I get that. And I'm not trying to take over or change what you've built. I just want to be part of it. For them. For us. Emily looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained cautious. Okay, she said softly, but let's take it slow. True to his word, Ryan began finding small ways to ease Emily's burden. He adjusted his work schedule to spend more time with Dylan and Logan, taking over school drop-offs and pickups when Emily needed a break. He surprised her with groceries when he noticed her fridge was running low and helped her organize her chaotic living room, transforming it into a cozy, kid-friendly space. At first, Emily resisted his efforts, her instincts urging her to maintain control. But gradually, she began to let her guard down, allowing Ryan to step in. Their shared moments became less about logistics and more about rebuilding trust. They talked late into the night, reflecting on their past and the unexpected journey that had brought them back together. One evening, as the boys were fast asleep, Emily showed Ryan a small box she kept tucked away in her closet. Inside were photos, keepsakes, and letters she'd written to Dylan over the years, letters she'd never sent but couldn't bring herself to throw away. I used to write to him, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. I wanted him to know how much I loved him. Even if I couldn't be there, I never thought I'd have the chance to say it in person. Ryan's throat tightened as he looked at the carefully preserved letters. He'll know, he said softly. You've given him so much already. And now, you'll have the chance to give him even more. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes shimmering with tears. It's just, I never imagined this. All of us. Together. It's overwhelming. In the best way. Ryan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We'll figure it out. Together. Despite their progress, the road was far from smooth. There were moments of miscommunication and lingering wounds that surfaced when they least expected. Ryan struggled with guilt over the years he'd missed with Dylan, and Emily wrestled with the vulnerability of letting Ryan back into her life. One afternoon, as they sat watching the boys play soccer in the park, Emily turned to Ryan with a question that had been weighing on her mind. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together? Ryan hesitated, his gaze fixed on Dylan and Logan's animated game. All the time, he admitted. But wondering doesn't change where we are now. And honestly, as much as I regret the time we lost, I'm grateful for this second chance. Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's just, sometimes I can't help but think about how different things could have been. If I'd told you about Dylan sooner. If you'd been there from the start. We can't change the past, Ryan said gently, but we can decide what we do with the present. And right now, I'm here. For you. For them. For us. Emily smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. I guess that's all we can do, take it one step at a time. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the park, Ryan felt a renewed sense of determination. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was willing to fight for the family they were slowly becoming. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks that followed marked a significant shift in the dynamic between Ryan, Emily, Dylan, and Logan. What had started as hesitant steps toward reconnect Ion evolved into something more natural, more whole. The boys, oblivious to the complexities surrounding them, embraced their newfound bond with the unfiltered joy only children could muster. For them, being twins was an adventure, a revelation that brought a sense of belonging they hadn't realized they were missing. For Ryan and Emily, however, the path was less straightforward. While they were committed to giving the boys the best life possible, they were also navigating their own uncharted territory, rebuilding trust, redefining their relationship, and grappling with the unresolved emotions that lingered between them. One Saturday morning, the four of them set out for a day at the zoo. It was a crisp autumn day, the air tinged with the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of adventure. Dylan and Logan raced ahead, their laughter ringing out as they eagerly explored the exhibits. Ryan and Emily followed at a leisurely pace, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. "They're so full of energy," Emily remarked, watching the boys press their faces against the glass of the lion enclosure. "It's exhausting just keeping up with them." Ryan chuckled. "Tell me about it. But it's worth it, isn't it? Seeing them like this." Emily glanced at him, her expression softening. "It is. They've come alive since meeting each other. It's like a piece of them was missing. And now they're finally whole." Ryan nodded, his gaze drifting to the boys. "I feel the same way. Like I've been given a second chance to be the father they both deserve." Emily's smile was faint but genuine. "You're doing a good job, Ryan. They adore you." Her words warmed him, though he could hear the caution still lingering in her voice. He knew trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, and he was willing to be patient. For now, it was enough that they were making progress. As the weeks turned into months, their blended family began to settle into a routine. Weekends were filled with playdates, family outings, and quiet evenings spent together. The boys thrived in their newfound dynamic, their bond deepening with each shared adventure. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when the weight of their past threatened to overshadow the present. Ryan struggled with the guilt of not being there for Dylan's early years, and Emily grappled with the fear of letting her guard down again. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Ryan and Emily found themselves sitting on the porch of Emily's apartment. The city was quiet, the faint hum of traffic in the distance providing a soothing backdrop. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" Emily asked, breaking the silence. Ryan glanced at her, surprised by the question. "All the time," he admitted. "But I try not to dwell on it. We can't change the past, Emily. All we can do is focus on where we are now." She nodded, her gaze distant. "I know. It's just, sometimes I wonder if things would have been easier for the boys if we'd figured this out sooner." Ryan reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Maybe. But the important thing is that we're here now, doing our best for them. That's what matters." Emily looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You're right. It's just hard not to think about what they've missed." "They haven't missed anything they can't gain now," Ryan said firmly. "They have us. And we have them. That's enough." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe him. She squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the progress they'd made. As the holidays approached, Ryan decided to do something special for their family. He planned a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains, a chance for all of them to disconnect from the chaos of daily life and focus on each other. The cabin was everything he'd hoped for: warm, inviting, and surrounded by the breathtaking beauty of nature. The boys were thrilled, immediately claiming the loft as their secret hideout and diving into a whirlwind of games and exploration. Ryan and Emily, meanwhile, found themselves relaxing in a way they hadn't in years. They spent the evenings by the fire, sharing stories and rediscovering the connection that had once drawn them together. On the second night, as the boys slept upstairs, Ryan turned to Emily with a question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Do you think we can do this?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady. "Build a life together, as a family?" Emily looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I think we already are," she said softly. "It's not perfect, and it won't always be easy, but I think we can make it work." Ryan felt a surge of hope at her words. "I want this, Emily. I want us, all of us." Emily smiled, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. "So do I. But we have to take it one step at a time." Ryan nodded, understanding the weight of her caution. "One step at a time," he agreed. As they sat there, the fire crackling softly in the background, Ryan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time, the future felt less like a daunting unknown and more like an open horizon, full of possibilities. He reached for Emily's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. Together, they watched the flames dance. Their shared warmth a reflection of the family they were building, imperfect, but full of love and hope for the days to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a golden glow, Ryan, Emily, Dylan, and Logan sat together on the porch of their mountain cabin. The boys were curled up in blankets, giggling over a shared secret, their identical smiles a symbol of the unbreakable bond they had rediscovered. Emily rested her head on Ryan's shoulder, a quiet contentment settling over her as the evening air carried the soft rustle of the trees. For the first time, their little family felt complete. The journey that had brought them here was anything but easy, filled with heartbreak, tough choices, and the weight of the past. But they had learned to embrace the messy, imperfect beauty of love and family. Looking out at the vast expanse of stars beginning to dot the sky, Ryan felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had given him a second chance, not just at being a father, but at building something real, something lasting. And as laughter echoed into the night, he knew that this was only the beginning of their story. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to Life Stories for more tales of love, resilience, and second chances. See you in the next chapter.